"Hey, clipboard girl, this ain't kindergarten. Go fetch some bandages and let the real medics handle it." The words rang out, loud enough for the wounded to hear. Grace Whitmore didn't flinch. She tightened the strap on her old leather medkit and waited. Hours later, the blast came. When the explosion hit, they froze. Doctors shouted. Medics tripped. 18 soldiers bled out in the dirt. One nurse, the quiet one they mocked, grabbed her kit and walked straight into the fire. No rank, no permission, just hands that had done this before and a patch no sniper dared to shoot. Who is Grace Whitmore? And what did war teach her that made even chaos fall silent? The clinic smelled of metal, bleach, and diesel, not the clean, comforting kind, but the biting, sterile staleness of a place where people bled too often and smiled too little. Outside, generators groaned beneath the desert sun. Inside, the tension was sharper than the instruments. Grace Whitmore moved through the rows like a ghost with purpose. Her olive scrubs, faded at the shoulders, bore a scratched, barely legible name tag. Her brown leather medkit, weathered and out of place among the newer, shinier gear, hung across her body. Some called it nostalgic, others joked it was a souvenir from nursing school. No one asked where it came from. No one asked her anything, really. "Hey, clipboard girl," Corporal Vance barked one morning, his voice carrying across the ward. "This ain't kindergarten. Go fetch some bandages and let the real medics handle it." He chewed gum. Always loud, always craving an audience. A few chuckles followed. Grace didn't flinch. She adjusted her medkit strap, tightened it against her shoulder, and moved on. Clipboard clutched to her chest. She didn't defend herself. She never did. To the others, she was Whitmore the Wanderer. Miss Supply Run, or worse, the janitor nurse. If you weren't suturing in front of an audience or rattling off field protocols during briefings, you were nobody. Grace had perfected invisibility. She floated between for poles and supply carts, always knowing what needed restocking, always fixing what others forgot. They didn't notice only when she paused too long or asked a question too precise. "Stick to samples, Whitmore," Nurse Carlaw once snapped, her manicured nails waving like a warning. "Diagnostics are for the licensed." Grace nodded, as always, but her stance back straight, chin slightly tilted, hinted she'd been in louder rooms under worse lights, with stakes beyond charts and code colors. No one cared. The medics laughed harder when she passed. The doctors barely saw her. The patients rarely listened. Once, when she approached a young private with a badly bandaged arm and asked softly, "May I take a look?" He shook his head. "I'll wait for a real nurse." He didn't know his tourniquet was loosening. He didn't see her eyes narrow for a fraction of a second, then soften, unreadable. She left a roll of gauze beside him and walked away. Later, that gauze kept him from blacking out before the surgeon arrived. No one remembered that part. The clinic wasn't made for gentleness or grace. A converted shipping bay turned medical ward. It had gray walls, flickering lights, and metal beds that groaned louder than the patients. Soldiers shuffled in and out, some limping, some silent, some holding themselves together with willpower. Alone, Grace moved among them like a current beneath the noise. She didn't talk unless necessary, didn't laugh unless it comforted someone else, didn't rest unless others had. She refilled saline tanks, charted vitals, and cleaned trays. No one else touched. She organized chaos without asking permission. But because she didn't ask for credit, they let her stay in the background. Once, during a lull, a young medic named Kyle tossed a fake wound at her feet, ripped from a training dummy, dripping red dye. "Here, Whitmore, see if you can handle this one without fainting." The room erupted in laughter. Grace picked it up, turned it in her hand, examined the coloring like an artifact. "Too much dye," she murmured. "Real blood's thicker, warmer." The room went still. Kyle's grin faltered. She placed the wound back on the tray and walked away. They didn't laugh again that day, but moments like that didn't rewrite reputations. Even after she stitched her own palm shut when glass sliced her, during an emergency cleanup, threading a needle through her skin without flinching while others scrambled for gloves and gauze, she was still the quiet one. Even when her charting was so meticulous that an outside officer assumed she was lead triage, only to be corrected with a laugh. "No, she's just supply rotation." even when her uniform was the only one spotted in the ward before and after every shift. They saw her hands, but never looked closely enough to see what they were capable of. One evening, Grace paused by the clinic window. The sun bled orange light through a cloud of dessert dust. She pulled a photo from the inner pocket of her kit. 6 soldiers, smiling, half covered in sand. Edges creased from being unfolded and refolded 100 times. Her eyes lingered. Then she tucked it away and turned to refill the morphine cabinet. Behind her, someone muttered, "I still don't get why she's here." No one answered. No one ever asked who Grace Whitmore really was. They just saw a clipboard and never questioned the hands that held it. There are moments in a military clinic when the air shifts not from sirens or gunshots, but because someone does something so steady, so unexpected, that the room forgets how to breathe. This was one of those moments. It was a supply rush. Someone had knocked over a tray of sealed vials, antibiotics, painkillers, 1 glass bottle of adrenaline. The room was loud, orders shouted, boots scraping the metal floor, blood streaking from the last casualty run. Grace knelt to clean the mess, quiet and focused as always. Then a shard from a broken vial caught her palm, slicing deep. Blood came instantly, hot and thick, dripping onto the floor with quiet taps. "Someone get a doc," Carla shouted. A few medics moved, but not toward Grace. They paused, expecting her to react as they'd always assumed, fragile, out of place. But Grace didn't cry out or ask for help. She reached into her kit, pulled out a clean cloth, wrapped her hand tight, and sat down. No drama, no hesitation, just control. Then, as the room watched in silence, she retrieved a curved suture needle and surgical thread from her kit. She cleaned the skin with antiseptic, unwrapped her palm, and began stitching. The needle passed through torn flesh with mechanical precision. 1 stitch, 2, 3. The skin pulled together neatly. Her face was blank, her breath steady. Blood pooled on the stool below, but her rhythm never broke. By the 4th stitch, the room was dead quiet. No one moved. Even the overhead lights seemed to buzz softer, as if the clinic held its breath. Where did she learn that? Someone whispered. No one answered. When Grace tied the final knot and wrapped her hand again, it wasn't applause that followed, it was respect. The kind of silence that clings to walls and lingers long after the moment passes. Later that evening, as if nothing had happened, Grace returned to her supply shelf. Her stitched hand trembled only slightly, barely noticeable. As she restocked morphine and labeled vials, something in the ward had changed. People moved around her differently. They still didn't know who she was, but they knew she wasn't what they'd assumed, and that unsettled them more than they wanted to admit. 2 days later, during triage prep, a young recruit came in with a puncture wound in his shoulder from a training misfire. Deep, awkwardly placed near a vital artery. Dr. Patel was delayed. Nurse Carla froze, unsure where to cut or clamp. Grace stepped forward without asking permission. With her bandaged hand, she rotated the soldier's arm, releasing pressure on the clotting, then signaled for sterilized clamps, marked 3 points on the skin with iodine, and pressed gauze around the artery to stabilize it. The soldier groaned. "Breathe. You'll be fine," Grace whispered. Carla tried to interject, but stopped when she realized she didn't know the next step. Grace did. The dressing was perfect. The soldier stabilized, not a drop wasted. No one said thank you, but they watched her differently now, not with laughter, but with caution. That night, while reorganizing her kit, Grace paused. She pulled out a folded piece of cloth from a side pocket, wrapped tight with the careful wear of something often mourned. Inside was a photograph. 6 soldiers, sunburned, smiling in dusty gear. Dog tags exposed, backs to the wreckage of a collapsed outpost. Grace stood at the center, younger but unmistakable, a desert sky behind them. One held a bloodied for bag, another laughed mid-sentence. Their eyes held firelight and the weariness of surviving something unspeakable. Grace stared at the image, then folded it back, tucked it into the lining of her kit, and moved on. Later that week, someone glimpsed the patch sewn inside her medkit flap. It didn't say nurse or civilian. It read, Phantom 04, MedTech clearance, unassigned, previously classified. No one had the courage to ask. The storage room behind the medical ward was an oven by midday. Dust floated like ghosts in the sunlight pouring through cracks in the siding. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, some labeled, "Most Forgotten, Ethan Cho." A 22-year-old tech specialist from Central Logistics was looking for ECG wires and thermal packs. Instead, he found a rusted metal case shoved behind defunct stretchers, containing an old military-issue laptop, its screen cracked, CASING bearing a decommissioned division's serial code. It shouldn't have been there, but Ethan, curious and bored, made the worst decision possible. He booted it up. The screen flickered. A dated OS loaded. One folder blinked back. Echo Bravo, blackout records. Ethan hesitated, then clicked, no password. Inside were fragmented video files, grainy, shaky helmet cam footage, most distorted beyond repair. But one file opened cleanly, and it changed everything. The video began in chaos, gunfire, screams, radio static over boots hitting gravel. The camera ducked behind sandbags, then swung left as a mortar hit nearby. Dust swallowed the frame, then cleared to reveal a medic dropping to her knees beside a fallen soldier. Her hair was shorter, but it was unmistakably Grace Whitmore, face streaked with sweat and ash, hands already at work. No hesitation. The soldier's neck was torn open, arterial spray pulsing out. Grace clamped the wound with one hand, pinched it shut with the other. She didn't scream or call for help. She leaned close, whispered something into the soldier's ear, then stitched his carotid artery under enemy fire. Behind her, others shouted. Bullets cracked nearby. A soldier dragged another body across the dirt, yelling for evac. The camera panned left, showing a tactical patch on Grace's vest, Phantom Echo. MedTech-0 for that. The feed cut to black. Ethan didn't move, then backed away like the laptop might explode, or summon someone with answers he wasn't ready to hear. He carried it to the nurse's station, heart pounding. Grace wasn't there. She was restocking gauze in the trauma wing when she returned. He held out the laptop like it was cursed. "Is this you?" Grace stared at the cracked screen for a long moment. She didn't smile, panic, or ask who showed it to him. "You weren't cleared to see that," she said quietly, then turned away like nothing had happened. But something had. Ethan told the people, those to told for more. By sundown, the clinic buzzed like a pressure valve ready to burst. She was in Phantom Echo. "That unit's classified. Wasn't that a Black Ops Med battalion? I thought they all died in Syria." She stitched a neck artery in a war zone. "That's not just nurse stuff." Some didn't believe it. Carla scoffed. "Probably staged. Anyone can fake footage these days." Dr. Patel laughed it off. "Old video doesn't mean she's special." But others fell quiet around her. They noticed how she changed IV bags, adjusted patient positioning with one glance, spoke only when precise. They started counting how many times she'd stepped in without fanfare, how many times things turned out okay because of her. Grace didn't confirm or deny anything. When Ethan nervously apologized for snooping, she said, "Some files weren't meant to be opened. But now that it is, be careful what you share." She handed him a restocked tray and moved on. He never brought it up again, but whispers carried farther than bullets. One morning during briefing, a visiting colonel scanned the room and paused on Grace. "You the one with phantom training?" Someone must have told him. She looked up slowly, her voice calm as always. "I was medtech, sir." The colonel blinked, nodded, and didn't ask for proof. That was all it took. Soldiers who once chuckled when she passed now made space in the corridor. New medics asked her to review their tourniquet technique, just in case. Some glanced at her kit, wondering what else it held. Grace said nothing. She didn't need to. The video had spoken louder than her voice ever could. In combat medicine, experience comes with medals, scars, or records. Grace Whitmore had something different, a reputation built in silence, revealed by accident, confirmed by hands that never shook. Somewhere in the back of the clinic, that old laptop sat again, screen cracked, lid closed, like a secret waiting to breathe. It began with a tremor, then a sharp crack, like the earth tearing itself apart. The clinic windows shook, metal trays clattered to the floor. Then silence for a second. Then screaming. A patrol convoy had hit a minefield just outside the perimeter. 18 soldiers. No warning. No backup. A plume of smoke curled into the desert sky, dark and thick enough to block the sun. The call came in like a wave of panic. Mass casualty inbound. Field evacuation compromised. Multiple critical. We need boots on the ground now. The medical bay burst into chaos. Doctors shouted over each other. Nurses fumbled for trauma kits. One medic dropped a stretcher trying to unfold it. Even Dr. Patel, usually smug and unflappable, stood frozen at the radio console, repeating, "We need authorization. We're not cleared. This is off base." No one moved. No one volunteered to step into hell except one. Grace Whitmore tightened her bandaged hand around her medkit strap. "I'll go," she said. No one heard her over the panic, so she said it. Again louder, with calm finality. "I'll go." The room turned. Carlisle let out a short laugh. "You're not serious. You're not even I am." Grace cut her off. Dr. Patel waved his arms. "You're not authorized. This isn't protocol. You're not cleared to operate in the field." Grace met his eyes without flinching. "I don't need permission to stop bleeding. Send the kid or get out of my way." Outside, the sky was stained with dust and heat. The desert shimmered with smoke and distant echoes of pain. Grace ran across the open zone, through the outer gates, over the broken trail. Her boots hit the dirt like she'd done this 1,000 times before because she had, not here, but somewhere else, another war, another name, another life. The blast site was chaos, bodies scattered across the sand, some moaning, some silent. One soldier was on fire. Another clawed at the dirt for a leg that wasn't there. Grace dropped to her knees beside the first man. No pulse. She started CPR, her motions clean, deliberate. She didn't check who was watching. She injected adrenaline into his sternum, kept compressions going. His chest spasmed, then rose. She moved on, a severed artery, a collapsed lung, an open femur fracture. Grace worked from one to the next field, dressing, clamping, ventilating, improvising chest seals. From tape and gauze, she yelled supply demands through the comms, sharp and fast, metoprolol on site. "I need blood." Gauze, airway tube now. Tell command field op required. ETA under 8. Every medic inside the base froze at her voice through the comms, clear, commanding, surgical. They didn't recognize it because they'd never heard Grace Whitmore talk like someone who directed triage under mortar fire. High above, a sniper on the canyon ridge spotted movement. He lifted his scope, trained it toward the smoke, finger on the trigger until he saw the patch on her kit. Phantom Echo, MedTech 04. His hand dropped. He whispered into his headset, "Stand down, that's one of ours, back in the dirt." Grace kept working. A soldier gripped her wrist as she stabilized his leg with a tourniquet. "I thought I was dead," he gasped. "You're not," she replied. "Not today." Another soldier, barely 19, stared as she packed the wound in his abdomen. He didn't say thank you. He just touched her sleeve, as if to make sure she was real. She was, and she didn't stop, not when her knees bled through her pants, not when her voice cracked from smoke, not when the sky turned orange behind the smoke cloud. When the medevac arrived, the flight nurse stepped out, wide-eyed. "Who triaged?" This, Grace handed her a clipboard covered in blood, soot, and her precise handwriting. "They're stable. Prioritize the unconscious first." The nurse took the board, paused. "You're not even on the rotation roster." Grace didn't respond. She turned and walked back toward the base, toward shadows that didn't know what to do with her. By nightfall, the base was different. People whispered, voices lowered as she passed. Even Dr. Patel didn't speak when she walked into the trauma bay and restocked her kit. In war, reputation means nothing. Results burn into memory. And 18 soldiers breathing is the kind of result no one forgets, not even those who once mocked her. Especially not the next morning. The hallways were quieter not because the base had changed, but because something inside it had. The corridors that once echoed with laughter behind Grace's back now echoed with hesitation, respect, silence. She passed the nurse's station. No one called her clipboard girl. No one joked about preschool boo-boos. No one threw dummy wounds at her feet. They stepped aside. That Dr. Patel, ever proud, avoided her eyes. He didn't speak when Grace retrieved the trauma charts from his desk, charts he'd forgotten to file. Carla, at the supply cabinet, cleared her throat as Grace walked by. "Grace," she started, voice low, uncertain. I owe you an apology." Grace didn't stop, but nodded once. That was enough. In the mess hall, people whispered in corners. They'd heard the comms recording. Her voice calm and clear, calling out triage orders from a kill zone. They'd heard the medevac crew confirm she'd stabilized every soldier before airlift. Someone passed around a blurry photo taken before the rescue birds landed. Grace crouched low, covered in ash and blood, one hand raised toward a crying private, the other gripping her kit like a weapon. That evening, a young soldier named Daniels approached Grace while she refilled morphine in the cold locker. He held something small, metallic, wrapped in cloth. "My brother," he said quietly, "served in Syria years ago. Said a medic patched him up when his unit was left behind. Said she didn't speak much, just worked fast." Grace glanced at the object, a tarnished medic's commendation pin from a classified mission. "He always carried this," Daniel said, voice cracking. "Told me to give it to her if I ever met her." His eyes met hers. "Was that you?" Grace paused mid-reach, looked at the pin, then at him. "If it was," she said softly, "I'm glad he made it home." Daniels nodded, swallowing hard. He handed her the pin and walked away. The next day, Grace showed up in uniform, not scrubs, not a borrowed field vest, but her own military fatigues. The nameplate was faded, the rank insignia removed, but stitched. Above her heart was a patch unseen on base for years. Phantom 04, MedTech, unassigned. She walked into the commander's office with a request already written. "I'd like reassignment to Forward Operating Zone Delta," she said. "Hot zone," the commander replied, surprised. "Worst hit area on the map right now." Grace nodded. "Exactly." He looked at her, then at the mission log. He didn't ask for credentials. He didn't need to. "Request approved," he said, signing. The papers, no one objected. No one questioned it. As Grace walked down the main hall that afternoon, the shift was undeniable. Those who once laughed stood straighter. Some saluted. Some nodded, not out of politeness, but reverence, not for rank or medals, but for someone who'd walked through fire and brought back 18 lives. "Thank you, Phantom 04. Someone whispered as she passed. She didn't turn, but she heard it. Later, that night, alone in the clinic, Grace pulled out the old photo. 6 soldiers, dust on their faces, laughter frozen under a desert sky. Her fingers traced each slowly, then she folded it, tucked it back in her kit, and zipped it shut. There was still work to do. She didn't come for applause or redemption. She came because some wounds never make it onto medical charts, and some hands were born to heal through the noise, not above it. Grace Whitmore never asked to be remembered, but from that day forward, every time she walked through the halls, they stood taller and whispered her name like a salute. Phantom -0 for Dot. As the dust settles on Grace Whitmore's story, we're left with more than admiration. We're left with questions, not just about her, but about ourselves. How many Graces have we walked past? How many quiet souls have we dismissed because they didn't wear their strength on their sleeve? How often do we equate loudness with leadership and mistake silence for weakness? Grace never raised her voice. She never asked for credit. She didn't fight for recognition. She fought to keep people alive. And maybe that's the most American thing of all, showing up when it matters, even when no one's watching. In a world where opinions fly faster than facts and judgment is a scroll away, it's easy to overlook those who do the work. The nurses, janitors, retired veterans, the folks who hold up communities without hashtags, medals, or press conferences. Grace's story reminds us, honor doesn't always shout. Sometimes it walks quietly into the fire. Here's where we pass the mic to you. Have you met someone like Grace, overlooked until they changed everything? Maybe a grandmother who held the family together, a neighbor who fixed things without being asked, a veteran with medals tucked in a drawer. Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters, or maybe you disagree. Did Grace go too far? Should she have followed the chain of command? Was she right to break protocol to save lives? Let's talk about it, respectfully, honestly. That's the beauty of these stories. They're not just about the past. They're mirrors for the present. Thank you for being here. If this story moved you, Consider subscribing, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is listen and remember. It's not the volume of your voice that defines you. It's what your silence has survived. See you in the next story. Until then, stay steady.